All right, welcome everybody to Youngstown studio. Our special guests today, Billy and Mara from Cedars. How are you guys?
Doing well today,
Doing
DJ.
well.
How are you?
Awesome. Thank you guys so much for coming down.
Of course.
Thank you for having us.
Of course. Yeah, thanks for having us.
Big 50th anniversary weekend coming up. I was thinking about this earlier today. You know, like it's a huge feat for anything to be going for 50 years, right? It's a fucking miracle to go 50 years in Youngstown. So, I mean, that's just unbelievable. What would you say, just kind of off the rip, what's sort of been the key to the longevity of Cedars?
I would have to say right off the cusp, my father's, what he did for the place unfailingly. And then as time's gone on, this one fitting the shoes right in, getting in the shoes. And I think it's been, it's consistent. You can't be weak. You can't stop. You just got to go. It's not for anybody that doesn't want to keep doing it, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Or have any time off.
Or have any time off.
Way at all. If you like time off, this would not
If you
be
need
for
date
you.
night, you're not finding it too much
No,
over here.
You're not going to get time off.
Right.
But I mean, there have been a couple places that made a long time. Think about the MVR.
Right.
They were around 1919. That's
Yeah.
100 years.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a long time. I mean, think about
Actually,
it.
Youngstown's full of
So
them.
with the Golden Dawn, the Royal Oaks,
Bunch
it
of
had a couple
pizza,
owners,
got a
but
bunch
you
of
think about it, there's a
people.
couple. But like I was saying earlier to somebody, a lot of things are about timing when things start and how they unfold. And a lot of those businesses also share that,
Yeah.
the timing. And so, yeah, I mean, what do you think longevity wise? You think it's just like trench warfare? You just don't stop?
You just don't stop.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just can't stop.
Yeah. It's a lot of work. I mean, it's a lot of hard
And when you
work.
want to stop, you just still can't stop.
Yeah. In this town too, you think about when the bar started in 1975, there was a lot more people in this town.
Right.
Even when I started hanging out here in the late 90s, there were over 100,000 people living in Youngstown.
Yeah.
That's really
But
changed.
just like today, though, grasping towards us kind of rock and rollers, creative types, artist types. Back then, a lot of disco, a lot of football. Not that I'm against football by any means, but a lot of
it
like
was something different.
college-based. Not what Cedars brought was a little different than what was kind of going on at that time.
Yeah.
And I think that kind of was a magnet towards so many different people who felt so welcomed there.
Yeah.
As I call it, the melting pot. You could be anybody. You could be a doctor, a lawyer, a bum on the street. You could be one of us rock and roll people. And everybody, as long as you weren't a jerk, you were welcome there. And it kind of brought so many different people that might have not have met each other before into one home.
Yeah. What were the origins of Cedars? Like, how did Cedars start?
My grandfather, back in the early 70s, 1972, had purchased the building downtown. At that point, he saw it as maybe having a bar. He wanted to recreate the old Italian restaurant, have a little restaurant, just a little business for the family, And of course, as time went on, it was a lot of work to rebuild the place because he originally bought it when it was burnt out. So as he did that, my father and his brothers stepped in to try to kind of help pitch in, make the place, habitable. And then at that point, my grandfather started to get sick. And my dad was on his way to be a lawyer. He had 3 college degrees. He didn't think he was going to own a bar, but his heart was, for some reason, not that it's any wrong reason, but he was very into independent music and the art culture. And he was going to New York City a lot. And he just saw something that wasn't here. And he knew so many great people like Donnie Yelich, all the guys from B Miners. Like, I mean, I could go 100 days of saying all the names, but they wanted a home, a place to feel at home. And my dad believed in that. And he had to keep fighting my grandfather, who didn't want the place wrecked or a bunch of punk rock kind of people there.
Yeah.
And my dad just stuck with it. And he proved that it was the right decision.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how it started. And then from that point on, my dad looked at people saying, here, this is your creative stage. Do what you
had a real good cast and crew to work with. When you have people that are buying instruments and want to make music, you have people that want to buy cameras and take pictures, and you have people that want to paint pictures. You have an art scene unfolding. Nancy Bizzari would do the poetry nights.
We had fashion shows.
Poetry nights. I mean, anything that was kind of
edgy.
to do, anything like vaudeville, not just music, but there was anything going on really.
And again, going back to what my dad said, everything's disco around here. Like, let's stop at the disco.
Yeah.
Let's get somewhere like we could like hang out at, and that's kind of where he started it and stuck with it. And then it, into my veins, it just like naturally went into my veins.
There's been a lot of sprouts off of Cedars. Think like, oh, there's a lot of people that kind of grew up in that room, over the years, sure. And you see them and they get married there, they met there, this, that. It's like, wow. Think of how much it's done more good than bad.
Yeah, right.
I mean, it's,
for sure.
It's been a wonderful place.
So, I mean, you pretty much grew up there, right? So what's your earliest memory of being at the bar?
Oh, geez, that's a hard one. I have super early memories. I talked about when my dad first passed away, of just being with him, picking up like the liquor orders, driving with his RX-7 down Fifth Avenue, listening to the Talking Heads, and he would tell me what shows were going on that night, and I'd hear these band names, thinking, "Who's that? What's this?" And then I'd walk in during the day, which was a total different clientele than the evening. You had your daytime.
It was pretty rough.
As we called it, the breakfast club.
Yeah. And it was wild. I mean, I saw it when it was wild. I can't even imagine when she was a kid. I can just personify what I know.
I'd just stand back with Mary Ann. She'd stock the beer and kind of get a grasp of everything going on. And then it really kind of hit me going into high school, later middle school, high school, when teachers of mine would be like, "Mara, who's playing the bar tonight?" I'm like, it's kind of strange, but back in that day, like nowadays, you wouldn't ask a student that kind of thing. But I kind of realized like how much my dad was a presence in town with the business. And I don't know, being in that building as a kid, it was just, I can't even explain it, but it stuck with me. And it became, as I was telling somebody earlier, like a sibling to me. I'm 45, the bar's turning 50. It's been that older sibling that you just were always around. It sounds strange to say it that way, but
now, you mentioned Mary Ann. Did you know who Mary Ann was?
I do. So my earliest recollections of Cedars, or the first time I've been there, was walking in there in the daytime. So when they still when that was still going on, the restaurant and stuff was still there. But yes, I do. I mean,
human beings like that contribute to 50 years for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, so there's been a lot of people
that
have
reactions,
really contributed.
Though, would be when people would be out for, say, a YSU game. And they had hung out at Cedars the night before, and they're like, "Well, let's stop by there during the day and get a beer." And you walk into the daytime.
Yeah,
it was a total night and day, literally. But
I mean, people would tell me wild stories. It'd be like people with like metal hooks for hands, just like throwing bottles.
Yeah,
just like wild. And the bar was even smaller than, the bar. You had that back bar area.
Yeah,
I guess that wasn't there, and there was like an office in the back that Mara told me her dad would crawl through this kind of hole.
There was a hole. Mary Ann would crawl through the hole to get the beer to stock it.
It just sounded like so wild when she described it. But knowing the building, I could see where that was. But it was an even smaller room, and I could just imagine cigarette smoke saturated.
The back bar was never there. It was just the original stage and that front bar that you would know.
And they did really wonderful things in that little room. And I mean, it unfolded.
And a lot of crazy people there too. Yeah. A lot of notable people have been through not only the downtown location, but our location as well. And it just, I don't know. We become an addiction to people in some sort of sense.
Yeah.
You just can't get enough. I don't know.
Going back to like in the 70s and stuff, because I mean, it started as I guess how did Cedars survive sort of the mills closing and the kind of sort of the great exodus of people out of Youngstown and stuff? I mean, that's obviously a extremely difficult time for the city and stuff. But I guess how was your dad able to keep it afloat?
I think, and correct me if I'm wrong in my thinking, because I was so young then, and it was actually a little beyond my time. When all that was going on, my grandfather's original intent of it being kind of an after work bar, that kind of started to slide with what you're saying. And then my dad tried to pump up in his mind what you could do at night and the different people you can have to contribute to what can form a great business.
And he had told me, Mara's dad, the Tomorrow Club used to have big shows.
State Theater
as well, big shows. And when all these hundreds of people would come out of the show, he wanted bands to be playing. That's why we always started at like 10 o'clock.
Well, no, there was the 1 o'clock hour. They would end out at 1, And my dad would say anybody that came, and it's what started years ago. And I don't know, you were probably around then, no cover after one.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember that was like kind of the staple back then of being told, okay, we'll go to Cedars. And of course, eventually, as you grew into knowing bands and musicians and us growing as a venue, that wouldn't become fair to.
He also had a relationship with one of those people. I forget what he said to me, something about because he had an ice machine. And the Tomorrow Club didn't have one or something like that.
I forget that
and he was providing ice for them or something. And they were pitching people, go to this bar next door, right down the street. And people would file in and it was like right timing.
Well, I think the whole gist of it, whether it be my father as a person or the building itself, it wasn't a threat. It wasn't like my dad was there to be community and he just wanted everybody to come together. And when you were in that bar and we continue to carry this tradition, you feel safe. You're not there's no messing around, there's no bullshit.
One of the things too I noticed about what you were mentioning about the mills closing and all that, it seems like when business left this town, the arts really kept the lights on. Mara's dad kept the light on for a long time down there for people to play. There were kids going to YSU. Youngstown had a big population at one point. There were people going to YSU, really interesting people from the area.
But think about the people that would have been at Dana School of Music back then. They're not hanging out up at the Uptown going to certain bars that were there then. They wanted a place to express themselves. And that's kind of where it really kind of...
Did you ever talk to Donnie Yelich?
Yes, but it's been a while. Yeah,
he was the B Miners were the first band to play
the actual.
And he said that Mara's grandfather was still alive, and Tommy's like, listen, he was going to New York a lot, but he went to some club. I forget what club he told me, but he was like, Dad, we got to do this rock and roll. Everyone's doing disco. We got to do. And the old man was a little apprehensive, like, okay, you can do it upstairs, but you got to pay for the kegs first, And he let him do it, and like hundreds of people came the first night or something, and the old man goes, wow, he was really impressed. So it just continued on. People put bands together, they played music, and they had a really good time.
That's and then my dad got found himself in a position. My grandfather got sick, and my father, who was going to get his law degree, already had 3 college degrees, didn't plan on doing that kind of thing, and it just stuck, just like the way it kind of stuck for us.
He did step up, and it did change trajectory. It would have been just an old man bar.
Yeah.
And he did change it. And so it was arts related, I'd say, when industry left. Because you weren't going to have the blue collar guys after work drinking anymore. Yeah. But you might have some painters that are renting studio space for really cheap down the road.
Or a priest or a lawyer or a whoever, a BJ, whoever's over there hanging out. That's how I met Billy.
It's crazy. I didn't know the origins of shows starting as late as they did, and that just because that held on for a long time.
Yeah.
Now everybody wants to.
It had something to do with
the bed so early, but like
something to do with the Tomorrow Club. I forget exactly the time though,
but that makes sense. Yeah,
he said he wanted when people to walk down the street, people be on that stage playing in the covered end or something.
I don't know if it was their license ended at 1 or if they just cut shows at 1, but it was something about the 1 o'clock hour.
Well, the Draft House had a 1 o'clock license. I remember when I first moved to town, and those bars would close, and everybody would come next door to Cedars. And so that's changed a lot too. But yeah. I mean, like when I first moved to Youngstown, there was BW3s, there was Plaza Cafe, there was.
Was that even open when you first moved? Yeah.
The Blast Furnace. And then Cedars and the Draft House.
Cedars Draft House, yeah.
And
Frida's.
Oh, Frida's, of course, but Charlie Staples and Garland's.
I do remember, being back in college and stuff, and the only stuff that was downtown was pretty much. Back then, it was just like a Cedars Draft House. That was where that was kind of it. There was really nothing down there.
Daytime, if you thought about like where V2 is, it was Basket by Denny's and Gio's Music, and there was an old black gentleman that had a newsstand on the corner.
Oh, where my dad would buy the paper all the time. Yeah.
It was a nice, cool, charming place. But there wasn't much going on down there. And that was like in the late 90s. So I can't imagine what it must have been like.
When I was a little girl, I just remember all the smokestacks through all the roads. And you had right next to the Paramount an old candy shop. My dad would take me there to get candy. We'd go to the old newsstand. And it seemed like there was a lot less going on then, even though it seems like there was more going on.
There was
then,
a bigger population.
Yeah,
there was more people here.
Right.
I mean,
a lot of people would skirt up to the Uptown.
There were even bars on campus everywhere. There were those clubs. that I would see radio stations at on a Monday night or a Wednesday night.
Legends and Ernie McDougal.
Ernie McDougal,
yeah.
They had a penny draft night, $1.50 Long Island's, and it was just hundreds of kids out. And you don't see that. I think culturally that's changed a little bit as well with young people and drinking habits and
right.
Certain things.
What have been some of the most memorable shows, both at the old location and the new location?
I have a personal one, but
sure.
I mean, there's we could write a book about all that. But and I want to say it was 97. Seagull Screaming Kisser Kisser came from Japan, and my dad was so super excited about this. It was one of the first like overly international, kind of getting to be known band to come this way. And I was only 17, and my dad goes, "Okay, you can finally come to the bar and hang out." So for me, that was one of my first kind of fun moments of seeing the show. And it was crazy because I think then there was probably only maybe 50 people in the room. Awesome band, awesome night. I'll never forget it. But there's certain memories like that kind of course, they had the Cracker night when Cracker played with the Line Around the Block and certain things like the Goo Goo Dolls, but I wasn't around really for that to see myself. But a lot of the ones I witnessed the best were honestly local bands. Nothing against anybody regional or international or national coming through, but some of the most fun
you
times.
would only get so many people for those national shows,
Right.
But like when you have your community enlisted, enrolled,
Yeah.
you really, in the early 2000s, there were some epic shows. Just talent coming out.
What's one of your favorites?
I mean, the new place. I remember when Shovels in Road played. That was a really nice show with Colin and Katie Ann. That Lou Reed tribute.
That one at our Cedars West
Rob
End.
from Boogeyman Smash. And I mean, it was an epic night. It just unfolded naturally. It was one of those things that was planned, like contrived.
Yeah.
See, those are actually the best
it was like
nights.
art. It was like art at its highest. These people didn't plan on playing with each other, and they all threw down, and it was so confidently done.
Yeah.
And it was just like, wow, this is music at its finest, really.
I think some of the best memories there are like the accidental ones. Like there's a lot of shows you would see coming up that, okay, we're going to get like 150 people, 200 people, whatever. And it was kind of pre-planned, like nothing against the band or the clientele, but you knew what was going on. But some of my favorite moments just happened out of nowhere.
Hanging out with musicians. Jonathan Richmond.
Oh, he was
one
of our favorites.
An entire day with the man, and he's one of my favorites. We talked about Stone quite a bit. He's a masonry enthusiast, and I love Stones myself. So there was infinite subject matter.
So we have his business card for his masonry business.
Arcade Masonry, if you're ever on the West Coast. But I mean, that was a memorable show. Asobi Sexu. That was a really memorable show. I mean,
there was quite a bit, actually. Yeah, it's kind of spinning my brain to think about all of them. But I
have a couple show memories from the old location and the new location. So at the old location, I remember booking a show since 2009, and I booked a show. I booked Danko Jones as one of my favorites. Right?
Danko Jones.
Well, he was doing it as a one-off as part of a tour with the Damned. Well, the Damned. I found out years later talking to Danko Jones. He's like, yeah, they didn't even like try to apply for their visas or whatever. Like they totally bunked the whole thing up.
Yeah.
And so the whole tour got canceled, and obviously there was no Danko Jones, but that was our record release party for Turbo Lovers at the record we had at the time, and we still did it anyway. It was on a Sunday night, there was only maybe 50 people, but I just remember it being like one of the funnest shows, just because everybody was there, everybody was into it. It was like this sort of, again, a total random night. You wouldn't think
that little time spat there too. I don't want to be quoted on certain years, but right around the time you're talking about, a little bit before, there was a lot of cool Ockerville River coming through, and just like cool little
the Sadies.
The Sadies. I mean,
Sadies played both
awesome.
Locations. Jonathan Richmond, both locations.
But yeah, there's like these certain little humps of time that, and sometimes after 50 years, but for me personally, say 30 years, there's a lot that just you kind of.
I remember those holiday shows, like back in Christmas. It would be like Christmas, early 2000s. The town would just swell so much because people had moved away because there was an exodus of jobs, and they would all come home for Christmas. I don't see that as much as I used to.
Thanksgiving was a huge one.
And Thanksgiving was another huge one.
Yeah.
But they used to, these bands would want to book these extravaganzas, and they would be, all over the place, but they were pretty damn fun.
And we do those things like with the Infidels, like maybe a couple times a year during the holidays, and it would just blow up again, full of people that span from the early 80s till the 2000s, just coming into one room.
The Jelly Bricks. I mean,
Jelly Bricks. Sure. Oh, yeah.
I mean, like,
you guys, the Jelly Bricks. Yeah. Yep.
I mean, yeah, I think that there's just been so many people. You've met so many people. I've seen so many sound checks. Yeah. So many sound checks.
Right.
I can't even tell you how many I've seen.
It's crazy because it's got its pros and cons in that way, that he's just said that you've seen so many people. And for me, I've met so many people. The majority of the people that I know, I wouldn't know if it wasn't for my dad having Cedars and us carrying that on. But with the backside of it, or however I'm trying to say, is the people that you lose and the people that you see one day and not the next minute.
You see a lot of people come.
When you know that amount of people, it's a lot to filter what goes on, and you become family to a lot of people, and they become your family as well. And I think that's the greatest thing about Cedars, is it's this weird little family with so many different people from so many different areas.
Yeah.
It's sucky we're getting to that age too, where it's just like, you know what I mean? Unfortunately, that's life, unfortunately. But it doesn't make it any easier. You know what I mean?
The crazy part of with having the bar, though, is the age doesn't matter. There's been times, unfortunately, not to go on a sad note, but when Billy had to deal with a drummer at the bar playing that had a heart attack right in front of him. He was only 20 some years old, to knowing people all of my life that go at 80, 90 some years old. There's never.
That was a zoo show that kid, and his name was Matt something. But yeah, he dropped dead like right in the bar, and you're like, Jesus.
Yeah.
And we carried him outside, and the paramedics were here. I thought he was burning up.
He just had a heart attack.
I thought I thought maybe it was something burned. He felt like 1,000 degrees. I was thinking, oh my God, this guy's burning up. Let's get him outside. And they're like, no, this guy's dead.
Dang.
And they said he had a massive coronary. I guess it was genetic, and his family said the guy was a ticking time bomb. They waited their whole life for this terrible news.
Man.
But that was a really there were some wild moments like that just.
There's actually a lot of wild moments, but fortunately with Cedars, it's not like a bar you mess around in. So the wild moments have always been these strange, unusual, or sad moments. They've never been
with the exception of the Battle of Hazel Street.
I wonder if BJ knows about that.
Do you ever hear this crazy story?
No. What's the Battle of Hazel Street?
One night, this really nice couple. I can't remember who they were. Even if we remember who they were, we should just leave it out.
I'll just leave it out. But he was in a band that played the Cedars many years ago.
They were nice people sitting there having a nice time. And these guys came in and just wanted to be like total dicks. They just started with this kid, and there were three of them. And they
against probably like 30 of our guys.
Yeah, and they beat the shit out of everybody in the bar. I mean, they were just like machines.
It started in the bar, and this is the only time, honestly, I ever witnessed this in either location. But I'm just washing dishes, and next thing you know, the gentleman we're talking about, he's being clocked up and down with beer bottles on the bar.
They ran him like a cartoon.
Yeah,
they grabbed him by the belt in the collar and ran him down the bar and knocked. And then initially they pushed him so hard that all the bar stools went down like dominoes. And then they picked him up and ran him down the bar.
But my father continued to sit in the back. It's okay, Mar. It's okay.
It's under control.
It's under control. And I'm like, I'm not sure, Dad. I'm not sure. And so you see Jeff walk out, and our old door guy, Alan, they're together and they're walking out. And as soon as I see Jeff kind of hit the ground, I'm like, it's not under control now, Dad.
I remember Tim going from the 8 Balls in the street.
Lauren.
Fist fighting. Lauren. I mean, it was just, there were people being hit in the head with bricks. I mean, it was just a bloodbath. And I never saw those guys again. I never heard another thing about it.
Yeah.
But I mean, they beat the shit out of anybody in sight. I mean, they were like machines. I mean, that was a wild night.
Yeah, that
was the only time I ever saw carnage.
Fortunately,
was the Battle of Hazel Street.
Yeah.
I mean,
anytime
I see somebody that was there, someone will go, I don't know about this guy. And I say, he's all right. He was at the Battle of Hazel Street.
Right.
Trust me, he's all right.
Yeah, memory from since you guys have moved over on the west side, was when we did. So if people don't know out there, you guys had a tradition for a while, and I think you still will occasionally do it on Halloween, where bands would do tribute nights to a certain artist. Well, we had the bright idea as a 3-piece rock and roll band. Well, let's do Huey Lewis. There's like 7 people.
That's what we have in common.
We love Huey Lewis, but there's like 7 people in Huey Lewis's band. So it was incredibly fun, and it was a great night. But I just remember, like, I don't really get nervous on stage, or like very rarely. I was never more nervous in my life than when we had to do that set of Huey Lewis songs, the three of us.
Who else was on that show?
So there was a group of guys that got together that did the Cars. So I think it was John Uhas.
Were they called Ham Water? Maybe
I'm not sure.
Ham something.
Ham Water.
I'm not sure what
that was one of them.
I'm not sure if they named it, or
they just did it.
They did the Cars tribute. I think Paco might have been in it too. But yeah, it was just a one and done thing because they saw we were doing it. And it was like, okay, we're gonna do, we'll do the Cars too. And it was like, well, thank God, we could only learn 10 songs. Like, and even then, like, I just remember, like, we got through it, and like it was fun. And there were certain songs that worked out okay. There are other ones where it was like, boy, we probably shouldn't have done that one. Or it was like, there were a couple train wreck moments in it, but we still managed to kind of cover it. But like it was a blast.
That's what it's good for.
There were some wild ones like that. I remember Spinal Tap.
Yeah,
that was pretty wild. And yeah, there were people would do that. The Sweet Delights back in the day did Prince. Or what did they do? They did something. I mean, I forget what it was, but it was totally epic. It was a tribute like that. Ziggy Stardust.
That's
what it was. Something.
There was a bunch of great tribute ones.
Yeah, that was a Halloween tradition for a long time. Dress up like the people.
Oh, we got a couple comments here. Aspasia from Penguin City here. Some of the best times of my life happened at Cedars. From unforgettable nights to the years I spent working there, will always hold a special place in my heart. Much love to Billy and Mara, 2 of the best people you'll ever meet. Thank you for the memories and music.
Oh, thank you, Aspasia.
It's crazy too. Like we all grew up together.
I went to high school with Aspasia. I mean, we didn't know each other really back then, but
we'll find old photographs. Like somebody gave me a zip drive one time with all these old photographs. There's a picture of Aspasia in there when she had blonde hair. And I was like, wow, that was a long time ago. I mean, that was like 30 years ago, maybe 28 years ago. It was a long time.
I remember one of the playing at the old Cedars. One of the first times Turbo Lovers played there, and this was a couple lineups because we went through a couple before Keith and Chris joined like 12 years ago and have been with me ever since.
My favorite lineup.
Oh, for mine too.
The old Manifold Stud. I love those guys. Little fantasy radio.
Oh yeah. Oh, absolutely, man. But so we, I remember so. At the time, like YouTube was just kind of like starting to go. And I remember like a friend of mine videoed us and put it on YouTube, and it was like, what's this? Like, it was like, oh my God. And the video is still there.
So
it's all
what's so
blurry
great about
looking,
YouTube too is that if you look up, there's been times where I've even looked, especially when we were doing the transition and moving, just Cedars Lounge, Cedars West End, and you'll see shows that you don't even remember happened.
Yeah.
That are there, but there's shows that somehow people were able to tape from like the late 80s, early 90s sitting on YouTube, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
A lot of memories in the building.
Nick Sarah, he's always running around with his camera. And he just sends me stuff sometimes like, holy shit, I forgot all about that.
Yeah.
And it's like, there was some wild times,
I think what's kind of fun too about it, not to talk off point or whatever, but when you see those fun times, you still see a lot of the same faces, which I enjoy. Even when like Tony Armini does his nights at the bar, it's Tony with his trombone and doing his thing. And
again, like that cast and crew, Tony's been hanging out at the Cedars since 1978.
Yeah.
I mean, he taught at YSU. Now that YSU's kind of left the arts, what will be the future Tonys? What will be the future people? Without those art students and the way things unfolded, we're all at a disadvantage. And I think,
but it's people like Tony, Terry Fetchett doing his thing.
Yeah.
He still showing that
they all went to YSU for art,
and they still come and grace our doors and hang out with us, which I'm so glad after we carried on the tradition, my father's legacy, to be able to have those names still, like those people still in the building. It's really awesome.
Yeah, no, I mean, it was a good casting crew, a lot of good people. But yeah, I mean, and they still come, when you think about it, someone will be like, I started going to this bar, before you were born. Like, you're right. You're totally right.
I think the laughable one too is I met my wife here. I got married here. I met the father of my children here, and I'm sitting here looking at him X amount of years later, and we're in the same boat.
What I've noticed too, because so much history's gone on, sometimes people treat us like their ex-girlfriend. do you know what I mean? This guy I used to date, he always hung out there, and there's like some falling out, and then it's like we're the ex-girlfriend. You don't see them for a while, then they come back.
Or there's that time where it's like, whose bar is it? It's
unfortunately, when people break up, and then you get to like, oh, well, whose bar are they? They're both hanging out.
They're treating us like an ex-girlfriend. You see this?
Right.
Yeah, pretty funny. I mean, but you notice that after a long time, because people have been married there, they've broke up there. Met,
all kinds of sorts of things. Yeah.
To my knowledge, no one was born there.
Yeah, right.
Well, you know what? No.
Parking lot, maybe.
We don't know.
Yeah.
How challenging was it when you guys had to move? Like when the downtown location, when the lease wasn't going to get renewed or whatever happened there. But how challenging was it?
It was a major physical challenge to uproot all that you've known for so many years. But I would say for myself, I won't speak for him, it was more of a mental challenge because it was what I knew all my life, and I didn't know how we were going to do it. Just all around, just how it was going to play out. And now that I look back at those stressful times in my head, I'm so proud because it's actually been very seamless. Even though it didn't feel at the time that way, it feels very seamless. And when you walk in that door, it still feels like home. You look to the right and the left, and
it's got a similar feeling. Yeah, the old space.
And he's really picked up on his end. I mean, I can't be more proud of Billy for how he does what he does for the place. So it's just been that consistency, just like how my father kept it.
I remember like when we found out which way the wind was blowing with the old location. It was a quite emotional thing,
Yeah.
And the first thing is, we have to pick up and figure something out. So you got to keep going forward no matter what. There's always a way to go forward. Just keep going. You'll figure it out.
What we were trying to decide. Are we going to do that? Yeah. Should we do that?
Play it even if it's wrong. Just keep going.
And then, of course, not to interrupt you, but the next step was to make sure my father was accepting, which I already kind of knew, to carry on his legacy. And I knew my dad did not want to be sick and know that there would not be any more Cedars. Right. So luckily, without hesitation, this guy with me.
When we found out, like, the first task at hand now is we got to find another place to play. And I've lived in the downtown for almost 20 years at a point. And I knew almost every building down there pretty well. Everything's kind of too long and narrow. Yeah. You really couldn't have music.
We drove around for days.
We drove around for days. We looked at every single thing, and I'm like, to fix this, to get this zone, like, this is crazy. Yeah. So we looked through this entire town. And there were things that, and one day we lived downtown on the corner of Federal and Phelps. Prima Cucina was there recently. Roberto's before. Yeah. Thomasina's Pizza.
Thomasina's.
I lived up there, all that transition. And I walked downstairs one morning, and we could just park on the street in those days. Underneath the wiper blade is a guest check that says, I heard you're looking for a bar. Call me, Cat. Rags. And Rags was Michael Reagan, who owned the County Mayo. It was an Irish bar. Yeah. And they put a lot of work into it. And it was always a nice building. And so I said, Mar, let's go up and hear him out, and we'll talk to him. And we went up, and at first, of course, emotional because the other location. Right. But out of all the places we looked at in the city, we were talking about leaving Youngstown. We were down in Pittsburgh looking for buildings and stuff. We were all over the place looking for stuff.
Not that we're not loyal to Youngstown, but we just didn't
wanted to be in town. And so I said, I think we can make a run of this place. And so we bought it from them, and 13 years later.
13 years later.
What's crazy when about that new location, one of the first shows I ever played in my life was in that building.
Which I'll find funny, not to interrupt you, BJ, but we keep being called the new location. We've been there 13 years now. It's so funny because I keep saying it too. I keep saying it.
New road.
It's the new road. But go ahead. I'm so sorry.
But so one of the very first shows I ever did, I was in high school, and I was like just like a cover band. We played like rock and metal covers, whatever. But we played at your location now when it was the Sunset Strip. It was a strip bar.
Right. With the cages.
Yeah, there were cages.
And I read it was a metal bar, and it was at this.
I went there when it was a metal bar. When it was Ground Zero. After that, we played there too, because that's what it became. And then it was the Splash. I remember seeing shows there.
I remember those cages. I went to a metal show there. And I swear to you, there were people in those cages, like with a grinder, just grinding metal. Yeah. Sparks flying everywhere. Right. I forget who it was. It might have been like 4130 or something. Mm-hmm. One of Jeremy Kerber's bands from a million years ago. But it was like a wild location. I remember that.
But in that building, when it was a Sunset Strip, because I remember we played it, and it was like on a weeknight. And we showed up to play, and it was like I'm like 16 years old, right? And then the dancers come up on stage and they're topless. My dad was sitting there watching, and I'm just like, obviously grinning ear to ear because I'm 16 years old. This is like the greatest day of my entire life. Like no one's gonna believe this happened tomorrow at school.
After this.
I know. Like no one's gonna believe this happened tomorrow at school. My dad just laughed, and I just remember him sitting there at the bar laughing. But yeah, in that same building,
it's crazy because one time I take pictures occasionally of the space and post it on the Instagram or whatever, and this girl comments, "The place looks great. My family owned the Victory Tavern, 1945 to 1989. So it was one bar for that many years, the Victory Tavern. And then from 89 on, there was quite a bit of change in that, still County Mayo.
Yeah.
And they bought it in 2005, maybe. And we bought it in the 12.
In the 12, yeah.
So, yeah.
It's crazy because even being from Youngstown and being around the West Side, I personally never, except for going to County Mayo a couple times, I never gave the building a second look or a thought, which is kind of crazy because now all I think about and look at is our building. But yeah, it's kind of, it fit in when
they could hold enough people, you know, because this town at the time, you get 100, 150 people. If you get 250, that's extraordinary. It's great. You know, so the biggest expenditure is real estate, heating, cooling, insuring, all that. Bigger space, more bills.
Yeah.
You know, and so we figured the amount of people that we had, we kind of knew what we needed in this space would facilitate what we needed.
I also felt too going into this, and I don't know if I spoke to Billy this way at the beginning of it, but going into this adventure, I didn't want anything over that. I didn't like, I'm not this big, huge.
We're a little mom and pop.
I like to be.
This stuff could be like weightlifting. Watch how much you pick up. You could really hurt yourself.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like I tried, even with the old building, 4-story building. Remember the time we had to rent a lift and do this?
But all that happened to my father was, what are you going to keep doing? What are you going to keep doing? What are you going to keep doing?
And bigger,
and he just wanted our little niche of a family that we've all become in so many different realms through Youngstown. We didn't
need all that space.
I don't want to be this
the bar
arena, you know, but
yeah, I mean, it's been a good space. And it's
the moment we walked in, I looked over, I go, it feels like home.
Yeah.
You could tell it.
People have commented, you know, and I made the comment earlier, you know, all new thinking is about loss, but it's kind of, in a sense, resemble the old thinking. And when you walk in, so many people are like, this looks like the old place. Because there's people that have come in that haven't been to our place since we opened.
Yeah.
And they'll pop in and go,
like,
oh my God, this looks pretty legit.
And then they sit in the stool for a minute and they feel, not that we've taken home away from home, but we're not in the same location. And as I had said before, it's a shell of a place. It's us that makes the place.
And we probably could not have stayed down here anyway. Look at how downtown's changed.
Right.
The bands used to park in that alley all night. Like, you couldn't do that anymore.
Yeah.
Like, there's no parking. There's like a lot of other issues now that you weren't existing.
Right.
When it was the heyday. It was kind of the Wild West.
Yeah. It's I mean, it's a shame that there's not,
like, the gritty's been kind of blasted away.
Yeah.
You know,
it's a shame that there's not, correct me if I'm wrong, there's no music venue down here, right?
Or, well, that's one of the things
that really does it. I mean, there does a regular, there's not like a,
one of the things I kind of crack on.
Aspasia, of course, Aspasia, what they're doing. Yeah.
One of the things I kind of crack on the arts and entertainment district is that none of them have music, original local art on their walls, or facilitate anything with the arts at all. And they all reap the benefits of these districts.
Yeah.
So, like, there isn't one to my knowledge. No.
Yeah. Other than, I take it back, but when I'm thinking over here.
On like this direction, downtown.
Like sort of like
Penguin.
that.
No,
but we're
Penguin has
thinking
its thing
way.
on the east end for sure.
Frida's.
Is Frida still going?
Yeah, Howard runs Frida's.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. Frida's definitely.
But yeah, like you said, like I don't know.
But like Draft House is are a good neighborhood bar that it's always been. Same with Imbibe and Rise. Federal, they do DJs here and there, but it's not a lot of.
It's too narrow and long.
I didn't even think about that
the
until you said it.
The spaces don't really facilitate it right.
They're not really set up for to be able to really do it.
And if you're a good restaurant, you sell good pizza, you don't really need to have a band. You're just selling good pizza.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? So what the businesses these people have chosen to go into, it isn't really revolved around music.
Right.
It's revolved around other things.
Right.
And if they do music, it's kind of the afterthought of there's an outlet over there.
Yeah.
Well, of course they built up the
of
course they built up the amphitheater over here, which is great for downtown. However, it's not what we're talking about, our little niche of an area that we all come together. It's more of a bigger outdoor venue as opposed to something that's
yeah.
So yeah, let's get into to this weekend, because you got shows Friday and Saturday. So first up Friday, Meat Fest. What is Meat Fest? So I know this is an Eric Tharp creation.
No. Our good friend Brandon.
Well,
okay.
It's Eric Tharp too.
This is Eric Tharp's
we love Eric.
He's sitting there one day and he goes, "I'm going to do this Meat Fest," and I'm like, "Okay, it sounds cool." And he's like, "No. We're going to do it like anniversary weekend. We're going to do a Meat Fest."
So he's condoning Brandon's behavior.
He's been talking about it, and Meat Department is, heavily embedded in this now. But he's got all kinds of stuff going on. Some kind of burlesque or something. A magician, I don't know, like all kinds of stuff he can tell me. He's going to give out all these harmonicas.
What's cool about Eric, though, is he's another one we met downtown that's traveled with us up to the west side, and he's just a little mainstay. He's part of our family.
But yeah, at Meat Fest, it'll be a fun time, I promise. I promise.
In a lot of different ways.
Yeah, John Morris from the Dinner Theater Rejects is like the ringleader, whatever that is in the circus.
That should be interesting. He's one of our comedians that does some of the comedy shows.
Dinner Theater Rejects. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah, so it should be pretty interesting.
Gotcha. Nice. Well, on the flyer, the Meat Department, Cerebellum, Via Guillotine, Eric Petroleum, Gone, and Chloe Jackson. That's Friday. Doors are at 7. And then Saturday, we'll be there. So it's Turbo Lovers, the Jelly Bricks, and Candace Campana, which would be great, because I think the last time we played with the Jelly Bricks was at Cedars, which however many years ago when they were there. And I love those guys. Just a great power pop band.
They're great.
Killer.
They're actually, now that you were saying before about bands to remember, I think as a young teenage girl going into being inducted into the Cedars, being able to hang out there, my dad allowing me to go down, they were one of the first bands I actually met. And
those guys,
all those guys,
so cool.
Larry,
cool.
They've always been so super sweet. They've been like family to my father, to myself, to Billy.
Yeah,
and you guys as well, of course.
Yeah,
and then we got on Candace's end, we've got Pete, who's been around for like forever with us.
Very cool that he's tied into it as well.
Yeah, initially, I asked about the Infidels, because I thought the Infidels, Turbo Lovers, in Jelly Bricks would be like boom,
Yeah.
But then Pete says, "Well, what's open with Candace?" I says, "Okay, let's do this." And so we'll have Candace open. She's blowing it up right now.
She is. She's a sweet girl too. Yeah.
So I think this will be an epic show.
It's going to be a good rock show for sure, 100%. So we're super looking forward to it. But it's going to be.
And I get off the shelf. I'll be behind the bar.
Nice.
It'll be us together once again.
And with Friday, have you seen Via Guillotine?
I've not.
They're sharp. They're sharp. They pack a punch.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, they're very hip. They're very upcoming.
Nice. I'll definitely have to. I'll definitely check them out. So Friday doors are at 7. I'm guessing shows like 8. Saturday is at doors 8:30.
It says 8:30 on the poster, but I think they'll be 8 o'clock. I mean, I think we're gonna do early sound checks.
Yeah.
So everything will be squared away.
Gotcha.
And I'm sure you guys have all talked about drum kits and
I think we're all using the same thing. We're all gonna So I think we're all just gonna make it easy, whatever. Great. So every week, so we can just do like a 9, 10, 11 kind of thing, or not, or whatever. But just so there's no minimal times between changeovers and stuff. You know what I mean? But but
keep
it's
the continuity.
Yeah, but it's gonna be a good rock show.
I think so. I think so
for sure.
The only missing piece is if Tommy could be there.
Yeah, it'd be nice.
That'd be really nice to see him there. Yeah. He'd be super proud.
Yeah. I'm in the 50 years. You have been around 45 of them. I've been around 25 of them. A lot of crazy things. A lot of wonderful things have happened there. It's been a wonderful place.
Looking toward the rest of this year, is there anything, any plans, any sort of highlight shows, anything that kind of stands out, kind of getting into the rush of the year?
We're doing a little bit of, Billy makes a joke, when you have the time, you don't have the money. When you have the money, you don't have the time, and it kind of all gets meshed in together. But we're starting to work on some parts of our area, like our patio.
Yeah.
We're trying to slowly create. He does all of it with his own hands, kind of deal, as far as when he has time to give into it. It's a slow creation, but we have
a nice little stage out there. Just some nice little acoustic.
We have a couple little business projects in our brain that kind of fit our area that we're excited to.
We book a lot of local bands. Occasionally somebody will write to us, or we'll write to them and say we got a really good concept. We usually book local bands, though, for the most part. Original local bands.
Yeah.
And they usually book about 90 days out if they're serious. Some will book a month out. So our calendar has always been like, well, guys that are really serious will book months out. People that are kind of serious, 90 days out, and then months out or weeks out or whatever. And so I've always handled booking that way. I've always booked the club that way. But usually the holidays, we always have something going.
Yeah.
And I know that there's something in the works for Halloween, for sure.
There's actually a couple things. We're not going to give too much information yet.
But there's a couple good for Halloween. And that's a Friday this year. So it'll be.
We don't have to do Huey Lewis again, do we?
No.
Actually,
that would be a nice
BJ. That's exactly. And I was going to wear my Huey Lewis T-shirt today. That's exactly what we were thinking. But no.
Yeah.
That was a heavy lift. That was a heavy lift. It was a lot of fun.
Come on, some sports.
We still do a couple. Every once in a while, we'll still throw a Huey song in there.
What I like about that stuff is it makes everybody practice.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Like you're like, shit, we got an assignment. Well, sometimes without an assignment, you're like, just get lost.
Then I realized, like, boy, I'm not very good at this.
Sometimes you need an assignment, And I'm the same way as an artist. If there's a show or something coming up, I got a deadline. I got something to work towards. But if I got no deadline, it's like la-da-da. You just kind of get lost in it.
Yeah. Well, I'd be remiss too. I want to talk about the food that you do down there, because you do different. It's kind of like a rotating menu. Like certain nights you'll have different stuff, and your St. Patrick's menu is like the killer all the time. I think it's the best in town, honestly.
We've become this pseudo Lebanese Irish bar. I mean, I'm Irish too, but we definitely have picked up the St. Patrick's Day.
When the old place, when Mara came back from New York, she took over the restaurant. Restaurant business was always really tough in downtown.
Yeah.
Nowhere for the waitresses to park, not a lot of people coming in, the overhead, all these kind of things. And so she thought it would be better, and so did everybody involved, to close the restaurant and just have the bar. And so we did that for many years.
Because I was worried it would just
be in those days, for some reason, you didn't need food. People just drank.
Yeah, right.
They just didn't care. They drank, and that was fine. Something changed at a certain point. I don't know when. It might have been 2013, 14, something like that, where people started wanting food. And I remember when we bought the Mayo, they had really put a nice new kitchen in there. Flat top, grill, 6-burner stove, fryer, hood, all this.
Yeah.
I said, well, since it's here, we won't dive too far down the rabbit hole of restaurant, because we know what that business can be like.
Yeah.
And so
that was one of my other stipulations.
Yeah, she really kind of put a leash on me with cooking.
I had a couple little, if we're going to do this, I can't do this. I didn't want too big of a place, and I didn't want this full on restaurant.
Yeah.
Because it's just like picking up something heavy, kind of hurt yourself. And so I crept into it with my Taco Tuesday. I started doing that, and that went really well.
I like how he says he crept into it, because he has.
I did.
And he's doing so good with it.
I did. I crept right into it.
Because he's now known to have the best burger in town and the best taco in town.
And the Reubens, and anything we do at St. Patrick's time.
Reuben is my favorite.
My mother always wanted to do St. Patrick's stuff, and she was Scottish, but she's got that British Isles cookbook in her.
Yeah.
And so we started doing St. Patrick's, and it really turned into something quite special. This past one was the busiest one we've ever had. I mean, the whole weekend was the busiest one we've ever had in that 50 years.
Yeah. I'd have to say,
that's insane.
Those 2 days were probably the busiest 2 days ever in 50 years of.
And so it's really turned into, but like I said, in the old days, people would just drink. This was a lot of food. So that's changed a little bit where people were kind of. People were eating a little bit more.
I peeled a lot of potatoes.
Sure.
Yeah, like 800 pounds of potatoes.
But that's another thing too, is everything's homemade from scratch. we are not buying off of a truck. We're not doing any of that.
I'm not in the food storage business at all.
If he's doing St. Patrick's Day and there's homemade mashed potatoes, Mara Simon's peeling all the potatoes.
Yeah, we're doing them all.
Billy's doing all the meat. He's doing, it's all, again, ma and pa.
Yeah. And so, I mean, it's funny, like, but the burger thing, during the pandemic, I got into gardening, and watching a lot of cooking videos and things. And so I started making smash burgers. I watched these Koreans making them. Yeah. And I'm like, dude, these Koreans are making these like really great looking burgers with this onions and the burger fat. And the whole thing kind of looks sacred in a way.
Most women would be like mad at what their men watch on like YouTube and TV and the internet. Here's him with these, hey, Mara, I got a new cooking idea for the bar. I got a new recipe for the bar for this. So he's constantly, I mean, we eat, breathe, live Cedars. I mean, it's, as I said, not only my sibling, but it's become a child as well in some weird sense, but it never escapes our brain. We're always,
and up until my mother died, we were doing soups a lot. And Mara made a wonderful soup, a Moroccan chickpea. It's out of this world. Well, this winter, we're going to start making soups this fall.
I'll bring back the hummus again, too. I was doing the original Cedars hummus.
The original Cedars, the restaurant, it was Lebanese based. And it was a great menu. But again, that was wrong place, wrong time. Yeah. The Rock and Roll Club was right place, right time. So, that's just how town is. That's how it was anyway. It's never changing.
But I do give my dad a lot of credit for when he believed in Cedars, early rock and roll days, getting the bands going. His next transition was in 96, getting that cafe going. Yeah. That was his vision. And people thought he was strange. What, are you going to have a patio? People eat outside. And we talk about it all the time, but it was one of the original first ever full-on eat-out patio in all of Mahoning County, actually. And it was great for the time that it was, but it just...
And one of those things, too, I was thinking of when you said Mahoning County patios. If you think back, Boardman was a dry town. And it wasn't until Chi-Chi's went there
Poland,
that they even started selling alcohol. Right? What was the Magic Twanger and the Silver Dollar?
And what was the other place where the Magic?
But there wasn't like alcohol out there.
No.
And
then the other big thing too back in the day was in PA. What was the drinking laws?
So, like Pete Trevere and these guys in the Infidels, like John, they're at that age. Up until 1984, you could drink 3-2 beer until you were at 18. So in Western PA, where I grew up, very, very prohibition-like with beer. Yeah. You couldn't buy at a store. You had to go to a distributor. You could only buy AKs. So a lot of the kids.
So now think about in the 80s, why so many Western PA people ended up at Cedars doorstep.
A lot of Western PA guys that wanted to play rock and roll were like, hey, in Youngstown, we can get a beer and play and go in the bar. PA, you had to be 21 to go in there no matter what. There was no ifs, ands, or buts. So it really did cut off the youth to music. Yeah. Those people came over here, got a beer, started bands, played. Some of those people still play to this day. And that was a current from the Western PA over. But if that wouldn't have happened,
True.
Another beer memory I have from those years. You guys had Dollar Straw. I drank so much straw. I drank so much.
8 kegs a week.
Do you know, BJ, I would go to after hours parties, and a friend of ours, a mutual friend of ours, won't mention name right now, lived at the Laura building. And he would take his mug with him every time. And my argument to my father as I got older is, Dad, you're buying this special mug for these dollar beers, and the mug costs more than what you're paying for the pint glass, which you end up putting like a Labatt in or whatever, But these dollar mugs would show up at the after hours.
Party, and so big,
and there'd be like, and then you know it was a Cedars mug.
All your dishes are in their cupboards. This looks familiar.
I remember at one point with him, I go, okay, I'm going to get a box. I'm going to take all my dad's mugs back downtown.
Like your cupboards are full of our glasses from the bar.
His deal with me was, okay, Murray, you can do that, but for everyone you take back out of my cupboard, I want a beer in it. So you stole it from us, brought it to your house. I'm trying to steal it back, and you want free beer.
That would always be funny when you open someone's cupboards and you're like, wait a minute, this looks familiar.
Yeah, you'd think you'd be like, oh yeah, they're coming over. You don't even try to hide it; it's just there.
No, they're cool. We buy these. It isn't a common thing. People are going to have a repetition of these beer mugs that we.
Well, that was the other cool thing too. Back in the day, my dad had one of those license. I think us and don't quote me, but possibly Draft House were the only two. I don't know. Then there was another bar downtown that we were the only ones you can buy to-go beer.
Mm-hmm.
So you can come in at 1:58 in the morning as long as it was before 2 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
And you can get a dozen beers and take it back to whatever Northside house you were hanging out at and having a party at or whatever.
You know, when I first moved to town, there was no shortage of mornings watching the sun come up from somewhere on the north side. On someone's porch, Park Avenue, Elmore.
So you like the dollar straw, BJ?
I drank so much of that back in the day. Yeah, that was like, it was a dollar straw. Like,
I don't even know if I could smell it now. You know, we don't sell it anymore, and we did for a very long time.
I told Billy I wanted to bring it back, but nowadays you can't sell anything for $1.
Well,
and
no,
like,
it
you
couldn't
try
be $1.
You try to bring straw back, and they're gonna be like, "What? More than $1?"
It was like $39 a barrel at one point, and it was like $15 a deposit. Now it's like $170 and a $30 deposit, and a $15 deposit on a tap handle.
Now it's like leave the memory there for people.
Well, I remember buying straw at like the convenience store or whatever else too, and it came in a bag with those stupid
the
strings.
white bags.
It was like, don't ever hold it by the strings because they busted all. Like, how many the strings would break all the time. Like, wow, this is the dumbest idea.
That's the one thing we've dealt in beer a long time.
Bags of beer,
and beer is photosensitive.
Yeah,
that's why Miller High Life's kind of an anomaly. Clear bottle, Corona clear bottle, Modelo clear bottle, green bottles, straw, they skunk easy. You have a Heineken in a can.
Heineken, my
100 times
beer.
Better than a bottle.
You can't drink it out of the bottle.
Don't have it in a bottle.
Even like Coors Light bottles, like too, will get funky.
Cans are way better.
Yeah, they get funky.
It's a light tight. It's photosensitive.
Yeah.
So cans are the best way to go. I know it was an image thing in the 90s with the long necks and all that business.
Right.
You know.
Yeah.
But Roadhouse days are over.
Right.
You can just get a glass and pour it in. And, you know. But beer's better in a can.
Yeah.
For sure. But straw was one of those in a green bottle, and I think that's why they put them in the bags to try to prevent it. But they put it in like these white thin bags.
Yeah.
So that was like a Band-Aid on a broken leg.
It was like
a Band-Aid on a broken leg.
Bad, held together with
what
like
that was about,
bad shoelaces, like pieces of yarn that just snapped. If you hold it by the strings, it was breaking. You're like, my straw. It's like a couple of times I walked out of the place with it. It busted literally in the parking lot. I was like, walk right back in and get another one. Like, all right.
Which is as bad as the cardboard things too. If those get soggy on the bottom, there goes all your glass
the
bottle.
One thing though that I gotta say, and I always say to Mara that's different about us and Mara's dad, he didn't have to deal with any of these beers. If you had like 6 beers back in the day.
BJ, you have to remember when you first came to Cedars, what are your imports? Heineken, Beck's,
Corona,
Molson. I think that's about it.
If you had 6 or 7 beers, like that was great. You know, and now there's like so many.
That is one thing.
He didn't even have to deal with Red Bull, really. I don't think. Yeah, just briefly
at the end. I would say that's one thing I give Billy and I is that stretch going into, especially the new location, but way before that, we broadened out the liquor shelf
and inventory
and the beer shelf. Like,
because we'll look at photographs from the old days, and it was the best of times according to some people. But there's like nothing on the shelves. So how was that? Was it the best
and
of
my dad would
times?
always say, "You get what you get. You get what you get." And now
it was great though. You know,
now we have to put a pump to it. Everybody wants this kind of this and this kind of that. And
when the consumers changed a lot, I think craft beers has almost turned people into like wine drinkers.
A little bit, yeah.
It used to be just like, get me a High Life, get him a shot, onward. And now it's like, what's the ABV? What's that? Is it gluten-free?
Well, I still drink cheap crap, so like I like a good craft beer once in a while, but like I'm not that, you know what I mean? I can do like 1 or 2. I'm like, I'm okay, I'm good. Like I'd rather just tell you, I could drink a ton of Coors Lights.
It used to be where people would always say, and get her a shot, and him a shot, and him a shot, and them a shot, and people are like, no, I don't do that. I can't.
Younger kids don't drink like our generation drank. You know, people just ran in music and he partied, and young kids will be like, oh, you know, what food do you have? Get in a soda. And I would say, you know, you don't drink. No, you know, my dad had a problem or something. I'm like, your dad's about my age. So that makes sense. It was a rowdy ass time. So who's your dad again? You know, like,
right.
That's when I know it's geez.
Well, one more time. So this weekend, again, the 50th anniversary of Cedars. Over in Cedars West End, over on Steel Street on Friday the 13th, we have Meat Fest. Again, that's Meat Department, Cerebellum, Via Guillotine, Eric Petroleum, Gone, and Chloe Jackson. On Saturday the 14th, we have the Jelly Bricks, Turbo Lovers, and Candace Campana. So yeah, be sure to stop out. Thank you guys so much for coming down. This was a blast.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
We don't do interviews too often, but when we do,
yeah, we're not like real media, kind of people for the most part. We kind of keep low profile.
Oh, good. Well,
every now and then.
No, we appreciate you guys coming out.
It. Thank you.
We appreciate you. Thank you, and all you do.
Awesome. Take care, guys.
Thank you.